This week, we're looking at the Romans, and looking at our timeline, they are going to be overlapping with the Greeks, the Etruscans, and the Egyptians, or at least some parts of what we've looked at with each society. Of course, the Etruscans are basically going to be brought in to Roman society. They're going to be assimilated. The Greeks will go through a somewhat similar process. The Romans will politically take them over by 146. The Greeks really continue to exist after that culturally, and they actually arguably outlive the Romans, since much of their culture, their Hellenistic culture, becomes Byzantine culture, although in a Christian form, after the fall of Rome. But as we move on, let's talk about the founding of Rome. The Romans, legend says, were founded by Romulus and Remus on April 21st, 753 BCE. Very, very specific date. And basically what happens is they decide they're going to found a city, and doing what brothers do, they fight. Romulus wins the fight, kills Remus, and of course, feeling very badly for this, names the city and the empire that will come after him after himself, because we don't celebrate the city of Rheims. So we have some growth that will happen. As we see the Romans develop, they start in the Italian peninsula and start to move out of there. They're going to start developing a navy, just like we saw from the Greeks and other societies, the Phoenicians. The Phoenicians here are basically Carthage at this point. That's sort of considered to be the Phoenician homeland, and they will be defeated in the Punic Wars. There are three of them famously during the Roman Republic. By 100 CE, so we're early in the Republic, we're seeing Rome take over most of Western Europe, the Balkans, into Turkey and North Africa. North Africa they're taking primarily from Carthage and what was left of the Phoenicians. By 500, so we're right after the fall of Rome, we see the whole thing break up. Very similar to what happens after the Hellenistic, or after Alexander during the Hellenistic, except here, instead of generals taking over, we sort of go back to clan and tribal groups, peoples that come together and develop. The Ostrogoths, the Visigoths, the Franks. The Franks become the French, the Anglo-Saxons, of course, more or less sort of become the English. The Byzantine will develop. We'll get to that later on. And the Romans have huge trade networks going all the way to China. So we find Roman coins in China and as far as Japan. They're trading throughout Africa, all the way up into England and Great Britain. We see them trading all across the world. So they're aware of all of these different peoples. And although the Romans go back centuries, nothing truly Roman survives. Oftentimes, what we see is based on other civilizations and Christianized. We see different forms of Rome. Everyone wants to be Roman. Everyone wants to draw back to the Romans, and so it causes some issues. Rome begins as politically and culturally Etruscan, although it's a separate group. It's the Latins. And they slowly conquer one region after another. The Romans are much more warlike than the Etruscans and other groups. As cities are conquered, if the Romans liked their art, their architecture, their science, etc., their craftsmen would be taken back to Rome and forced to continue their work. Sometimes they were left there, but still effectively acting as slaves to the Romans. And we start with the period of the Roman monarchy, starting in 753 with Romulus and moving through 509, which I mentioned before. We see kings, both Latin and Etruscan, will rule. And what happens at the end of this is Tarquin the Proud, the last of these kings, really sets things off for the Romans. The Romans hate monarchs after this period. And what Tarquin does is he rapes a woman named Lucretia. Now, the Roman kings were known to do this in the past. The difference is Lucretia comes out at a public event where Tarquin is speaking, stands up, says, "He raped me," and to show that she was serious, that this had in fact happened, actually kills herself on stage in front of him. Well, a man by the name of Brutus will go ahead and kill Tarquin the Proud because of this event. That Brutus is the great Samad grandson or grandfather of the Brutus who will kill Caesar. So it's a very interesting sort of connection that we see in Roman history.